Good morning, Honors Biology. This is Mr. McGee, and today we're going to do another lab with the fruit flies that we've been working on. Now that they've started to produce the larvae, we're going to remove the P generation and keep behind the F1 or the first generation of offspring. This will allow them ample time to hatch, and then we can work on the next generation. Before we do anything in this lab, we first need to gas the flies, and we're going to use this fly nap anesthetic to do that. It doesn't hurt them, and it's completely harmless. I will be doing this myself, just to make sure we don't have any flies get loose. But first, take a look at your fly vial. You'll notice you should start to see some larvae crawling along the sides. There's a little white one right there. And if you notice, some are more developed than others, such as in this case. And if you look along the back side, you may notice they will have put some pupae already in this little netting. Now, I don't see any at this time in this one, but on yours you might have some in there, so be very careful with this. So first, in order to gas these, what I'm going to do is take this fly nap and we're going to stick it in there and make them fall asleep. So you'll come to me at my station. And then I'm going to take your vial, tap it really hard to make sure they're all down. Push it away, and very carefully just set it like this. Now notice here in the vial, I don't have it touching the edge. You don't want this wand touching anything, otherwise it'll leave some of that anesthetic on there and it'll gas anything that hatches afterwards. I did get a little on the foam, that's not a big deal. A little bit is going to evaporate and it won't hurt them at all. But we don't want any more on there. That could definitely cause a problem. So please be careful with the wand. Don't wiggle it around and let it touch anything. And that brings us to another point. Don't set the vial like this on the table, because when the flies pass out, they're going to land in the gooey stuff at the bottom and then they'll drown. We want to get them out before that happens. So I don't care what you use. See how it's wanting to roll? Take any two things, keep it on the counter, and then what we're going to do is we are going to watch closely what happens. Okay, what you're watching for is when about 90% of the flies have kind of passed out, and you'll see down here at the bottom, they've kind of passed out. Give it a good tap to knock them down. When most of them, I'd say 90% have passed out, do this. Very carefully push the foam to the side and pull the fume wand out. Just kind of set this to the side for right now. Again, we don't want to get any of that on the side of this vial. Now again, notice I'm keeping this sideways because we want to keep tapping this and knock all those flies. Any flies, just give it a good tap. Keep them falling down. Don't let any of the flies land in this little stuff where the larvae are at. So once we got a good number down there, in fact, you might even be able to do a little count and see how many are down there and how many you put in there. So what we're doing in this lab today is we're taking our vial, which basically has, right now, both of these generations in there. You guys put these in last week, if you recall, and we're trusting that they have started to produce larvae, and it looks like every container has this. If they don't, then there's a problem. But we can't let these larvae hatch into adults, or else their parents will, this is gross, but they're going to mate with them, and that would mess up our genetics. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of the P generation. We're going to remove them from the vial, and that leaves only F1 offspring in that vial. That way they can grow, and there will be nothing else but themselves to mate with. For today's lab, at your lab counter, you're going to need just these three things. First, your container, once it's anesthetized. You again remove the wand, making sure you don't touch things or as minimal as possible. Always keep it sideways to prevent the flies. As you can see down there, they're all kind of in the bottom corner. Don't let them fall into the food again. What you're also going to need is this little container. It's got alcohol in it. This is actually called the morgue, and we're going to put all the flies into here. And then you're going to need this wand. I'll show you why in a minute. But first, take the cap off the morgue, take out the foam plug just like this, and very carefully give it a tap. Knock the flies into the morgue. Now, there may still be some live flies in there. That's why once you remove the wand, you want to wait just a minute. But again, you don't want to over-anesthetize because there are still larvae in there. And although they usually aren't harmed by this, something you just want to watch out for. Now, once you look around, make sure you don't see any flies in there. We don't have anything that's kind of maybe stuck in the netting, because a lot of times you'll have some that are stuck in the netting, but they're still not anesthetized. Just kind of look around and make sure, otherwise you want to keep the foam plug on longer. But in this case, it looks like I got almost all of them. Now what you're going to do, and this is kind of the tricky part, you're going to take this little probe, stick it in there, and very carefully, this is to make sure we have absolutely every adult out of this container, you're going to pull it forward just like this, and then you're just going to kind of grab onto it, and then give it a good pinch, just like this, and then kind of pull it out. Now be careful, because there may be pupae on yours and you don't want to crush those. The reason we're pulling this out is we want to make sure, look closely, are there any adult flies left on here? Now you're going to look deep inside the vial, and if we look deep inside, I just see maggots. I don't see any adult flies at all. So this container is good to go, but some of you may have a bunch of flies down there, and you won't be able to tell if they're dead or alive. If they appear to be alive down there, take this metal wand and stick it down. You can either push them deep into the food and it'll drown them, or you can try to fish them out with this, but don't leave any live adults in there. And then if you're sure there's nothing else in here, leave the pupae on there, and then just carefully put it and insert it back in the container. Take your fingers and push it back down. Now we want to push it just to where it touches the food. We don't want to shove it any further and crush any of the larvae in that. When you're done with that, you take the foam plug and just kind of pinch it, insert it in there. And we don't want it super deep. Higher up is even better, because it'll help vent if there is any of that chemical in there, but you don't want it so loose that it's going to fall off. And once you're sure that you've got the flies all out, you can see I got a dead one way down here, but that's not a big deal. You just kind of set your flies to the side, and then we're going to go put them back inside of our incubator, and that will be our lab for today.